So good morning, everybody, to our special Grand Round. This Grand Round is sponsored by Watch. Some of you know what Watch is, others of you don't, so let me just say and give you a little background. For probably about the past 15 years, we have had a women's group, which is called Women at Children's Hospital. You'll notice it doesn't say women physicians because we're open to everybody. It's run by a women's group, but we encourage anybody to join us in the activities that we have, which include quarterly brown bag lunches, this Grand Round, and a workshop. The workshop will follow this Grand Round starting at 10. That will be in Classroom A. We did have an RSVP for this. We've had a couple of people who were unable to come, so we do have some openings. So feel free to join us up there. This workshop is going to be run by our hospitalist and ED group, and I'm proud to tell you that this kind of workshop, which I call the Watch Workshop, has been supported by PAS for the past 6 years, demonstrating its worthfulness and importance to PAS. So please feel free to join us up there. Lunch will follow the workshop. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce Andrea, who's going to introduce the speakers.
Good morning, everyone. I really appreciate you guys coming in. So I'm very excited as part of Watch that we're going to be able to have 2 great speakers today to talk to us about being the CEO of our own careers. So Dr. DiBiase is Chief of the Division of Pediatric Diseases, Infectious Diseases, and Co-Director of the Congenital Zika Program at Children's National. She holds appointments as tenured professor of pediatrics and microbiology, immunology, and tropical medicine at George Washington University School of Medicine. And she's also a principal investigator in the Center for Translational Science at Children's Research Institute. After graduating Phi Beta Kappa from Boston University, she received her doctorate in medicine at the University of Virginia School of Medicine. And she completed her internship and residency in pediatrics at the University of California, Davis Medical Center. She completed her fellowship in pediatric infectious diseases at the University of Colorado Denver Children's Hospital and served on the faculty for 10 years in Denver prior to joining Children's National in 2005. Dr. DiBiase treats normal and immunocompromised children hospitalized with severe infections at Children's National. Dr. DiBiase's research expertise includes basic science as well as clinical and translational research. She serves as principal investigator for research and clinical trials, focusing on both severe and emerging viral infections. She leads the Children's National Ebola and Emerging Infections Task Force and co-leads the Children's National Congenital Zika Program, interfacing with regional, national, and international authorities in these goals. She evaluates and manages pregnant women and infants with Zika exposure and infection, and is performing Zika-focused research in both the United States and South America. Dr. DiBiase has authored over 75 original research, review articles, and book chapters. She is also actively engaged in continuing medical education for community physicians, outreach to the community, and educating the public via media appearances on NPR radio, local and national newspaper, and television. Dr. Chatterjee is professor and chair of the Department of Pediatrics and senior associate dean for faculty development at the University of South Dakota Sanford School of Medicine. She has previously served as the Associate Dean for Academic and Faculty Affairs and Chief of the Division of Pediatric Infectious Diseases at Creighton University School of Medicine. Dr. Chatterjee was born in India and attended high school at the Army Public School of New Delhi, India. She received her MBBS from the Armed Forces Medical College at Pune University in India and earned her PhD at the University of Nebraska Medical Center in Omaha. She conducted postdoctoral research in neonatology at the University of Nebraska as well. She completed her residency in pediatrics, followed by pediatric infectious disease fellowship training at Creighton University in Omaha. Dr. Chatterjee has been elected and selected to serve on several national advisory boards and committees, including the U.S. Food and Drug Administration's Anti-Infective Drugs Advisory Committee. She was on the steering committee of the Association of American Medical Colleges Group on Faculty Affairs and the publication committee of the Infectious Disease Society of America. She also served as the Pediatric Infectious Disease Society liaison to the IDSA Standards and Practice Guidelines Committee. She's currently serving as chair of the AAMC Group on Women in Medicine and Science. She's a member of the board of directors of the Association of Medical School Pediatric Department Chair, a member of the Clinical Affairs Committee, the Nominations and Awards Committee, and the Programs and Meeting Committee of Pediatric Infectious Disease Society. She also serves as Vice Chair for the Bone and Joint Infections Guideline Committee for IDSA and PIDS, and is Chair for PIDS on the IPV Program Committee. In 2016, Dr. Chatterjee was chosen for the prestigious Council of Deans Fellowship by the AANC. Dr. Chatterjee has received numerous research awards, and her research interests include vaccine development for human papillomavirus, other pediatric vaccines, hospital epidemiology, as well as antibiotic resistance. She has conducted over 110 clinical trials, published over 80 peer-reviewed articles, 26 invited review articles, 22 book chapters, and 1 book. She serves as a reviewer for 35 journals, including the New England Journal of Medicine. In the past 17 years, Dr. Chatterjee has delivered over 500 lectures and 150 scientific presentations at various international, national, regional, and local venues. She's also served as course director for over 40 CME programs and given over 55 media interviews and published 25 newspaper articles. So on behalf of WATCH, we are delighted to hear insights today from these accomplished physicians on how to be the CEO of your own career.
Thanks so much, Andrea. That was quite an introduction. So we're going to try to tell you, how did we do all that stuff?
Yes.
And I don't think this is working, but can you hear me okay? So what I'm going to do in the first 15 minutes is sort of lay a broad framework for sort of how I think about how you might try to direct your own career. And then Dr. Chatterjee is going to give you some more specific examples and actually a little tool that we're going to do, hopefully, before the workshop. So when we think about a chief executive officer, these are the attributes of a chief executive officer. And we have a great chief executive officer at Children's, Kurt Newman. And think about him. And then think about yourself, though, when you look at these attributes. You should be thinking of yourself as the CEO of your own career. So the CEO is the primary decision maker for the direction of their company, or in your case, of you. They take ultimate responsibility not only for the successes of that company, but also the failures. You have to take responsibility for your failures. You build something new, or you take something that exists in a new direction. You have vision, focus, you have a very strong work ethic. You're not risk averse, but you're also not reckless. You're not just randomly trying things and taking undue risks. And you often work alone, but you must build an effective team and inspire others to achieve that vision for what it is that you want to achieve for yourself or for your company. So I'm going to briefly go over what I consider 7 overarching principles to successfully build your own career and to be the CEO of your own career. So the first is actually very important. It's look beyond others' approval. And many of us have gone through life being the best kindergartner and the best elementary school student and the high school person, and your parents loved you. But at some point, you need to be able to look beyond what you're doing to try to get other people's approval. You need to look inside yourself and see what it is that you want to accomplish. You need to know what you want, which sounds easy, but it's not that easy, and then pursue that with determination and drive. You need to develop mental clarity. So it's difficult when we're all pulled in 100 directions, but you need to come up with a strategy when it's important for you to focus in on something clearly. You need to know how to market yourself, which goes against some of our own internal instincts to be, kind, respectful, humble people. But there is an appropriate way to market yourself and put yourself out there. You need to learn to effectively communicate, respect the power of money, and we'll get to that slide. And lastly, care for yourself, because if you do all these things but you forget to care for yourself, you really can't do anything else. So look beyond others' approval. Self-reflection and assessment of your own strengths, honestly, and weaknesses is very important. And I'm going to give you an example. When I was in Denver, I was really happy with my career. I loved the group I was working with. I had a K Award. I had all the collaborators in the world you'd want. But there came a point, for other reasons, that I wanted to get back on the East Coast. And people said I was crazy. You can't leave. It's career suicide. Don't do it. And I got all kinds of interesting comments from people. But I basically decided that for me, I had to have the courage to do what I knew was right for these other reasons. And it turned out fine because that's what I wanted to do and it was appropriate for the other reasons. Think about personal deal breakers when you're making a decision, because what Dr. Batshaw tells me or Dr. Steinhorn tells me are important may actually not be important to me, or may actually be something that goes against what I really need to have at the core of my decision making. Look beyond popular choices or the usual path. So just because you're not doing it exactly the same way that someone else did, it doesn't mean it's not going to work. And then finally, don't worry what others think of you, because that will ultimately hinder your self-fulfillment. So my favorite example of this is when I was making that move, I would sit home and worry, like, oh, what is my mentor going to think, and what are they going to do, and they're going to be just, never want to talk to me again. And my husband finally was just tired of hearing me talking and said, look, no one talks about you at night, at home. They don't care about you. You're not that important. Just get over yourself. And it was actually one of the best pieces of advice, because he was right. So that's important. Okay, know what you want and pursue with determination. Short and long-term goals are really important. I think you've all heard this in one lecture or another. But you also need to then go back and assess those short and long-term goals. So, literally write out a 1-week goal, a 1-month goal, a 6-month goal, and then these longer-term goals. And then periodically you need to go back and say, how did I do? And then readjust those goals. Because if you don't look back and see how you did, you often just don't get anywhere. Be an expert at the rules. So a great example of this, as Dr. Luban has taught us, is there are very clear, defined rules for promotion. This is not one area where you want to be creative. I mean, it's in print. It tells you what you need to do, and you need to do it. So you might have a different way of doing it than I do, but ultimately, at the end of the day, there are certain rules that you need to follow, and you need to be aware of those. And there's lots of people here to show you what those rules are. Relentlessly pursue those goals. So don't get distracted with other things that dilute your energy towards achieving those goals. But on the other hand, don't miss opportunities that come up. Even though, and I'll give you an example of that, something may come up that you might at the first surface say, well, this isn't, on my exact track. But if you think about it, it might open an opportunity that could actually lead back to that track or lead you on another track that's even better. Identify others who have achieved similar goals and talk to them. How do they do it? What problems do they encounter, and how do they overcome it? And then lastly, have you flat out ask for it? Meaning, many of us are kind of shy and they don't want to say what you really want because you think, oh, I don't know, may not come across. But I promise you, if you don't ask for what you want, you will never get it. So if you ask for it, you might get a no, or you might get, well, maybe, or maybe we can work around this. But if you don't ask, you will not get. So just remember that. Okay, and this is a great example of distractions versus opportunities. So Zika virus emerged. I remember the day I was telling Ajay about it, and they were like, this is a Zika thing. Are you sure? That doesn't sound like a real virus. But then it became very important, and Dr. Wessel funded a program with the Fetal Medicine Institute to do important Zika research, and they asked me to be part of that. And, I am interested in viruses and infections, but I had a lot of my own things going on, and I said, all right, I'll come along. Well, to make a long story short, 2 years later, we have a whole program. We were one of the first in the country. We now have funding through a Thrasher Award with Sarah Mulkey here, who's doing neurodevelopmental follow-up. We now have a contract with the CDC because they recognize our center as having expertise, and we're helping them with their international trials. So all of that happened because I didn't say no to something that wasn't immediately what I wanted to do, but turned out to be really important. And then on the right is an example of a REACH project. So, we're all busy, and students are continually wanting to work with us or residents on REACH projects. But this is a great example. Matia Chasson here did a really nice Lyme project, which led to our pilot data, which allowed us to be part of a very large program project that NIAID and Children's are now collaborating on. So just an example that it may not immediately be what I was going to do, but you can see how you can work these things in. Okay, mental clarity. For me, that means focus on the positive. So people say, oh, you're so optimistic and you're so, peppy. Well, honestly, I assess the negatives more than the positive, but I choose to not let the negatives, detract from what I'm trying to do. So you need to know what the negatives are in any situation, acknowledge them, and know how to remove yourself. That if it's 100% negative, just remove yourself from it, because it's going to go nowhere and it's going to suck all of your energy, which is a finite quantity. But you really do need to focus on the positive. And I say be the ball. I play golf. I'll show you a picture of me playing golf. You have to sort of put yourself fully into a situation when you're assessing it and not get distracted with all the things that might go wrong, could go wrong, the person that doesn't like you, all those things. Forget that. see the ball and think about what it is you're trying to do and get excited about it. Know how to market yourself. So all of us need to develop, particularly in academic medicine, a niche. So we're all great doctors, we all are smart, but you need to have a niche that honestly you can put yourself in a nutshell in a couple of sentences, so that when someone looks at me, they think, oh, virus, which sounds like a very a very confining role, but in the academic world, you really do want to think of yourself as something that can be very encapsulated, and then you can expand all these other things in your life outside of that. So the elevator talk, you've all heard about that, and so if I run into Dr. Basha or Dr. Newman and they say, how's it going, Roberta? I don't say, oh, the weather's great, and, my kids are that, What I say are I always make sure I have something in mind. Wow, I'm really happy about what I'm doing, which I am. Wow, thank you so much for the funding for that coordinator. Because of that, I now have a grant. We just published this, and that's going to lead to a reward. Thank you so much. That's it. When he leaves the elevator, that's what he's going to remember, not some main thing. You want to develop and solicit contacts. You want to network as much as you can. That's very challenging when you have small children. So there's a period in your life sometimes that you won't be able to be face-to-face as much as you were, but you need to get back into that because many things happen face-to-face that are not if you're on a phone call or you're not in the room, and you'll miss out on opportunities. And committee work is a great example. So Dr. Chatterjee and I met on an ID Society of America committee. She actually was the brainchild of this type of lecture. It led to some national lectures. Now, I get asked to do it in other places. So that's all from just joining a committee and getting some other exposure outside your institution. Learn to be an effective communicator. So you guys have heard this. Know your audience. Be organized, clear, succinct. I love the FBAR concept, which if you haven't heard of that, is situation, background, assessment, recommendation. So we use that a lot for clinical communications, but you can use that in any area of your life. You can use it when you're talking to your kids who are loading the dishwasher wrong. Situation, the dishes are dirty. Background, you don't know how to load it. Assessment, here's how you do it, and do it. So just be very clear and direct with people, and particularly with people that are above you that have many other responsibilities and many other things that you have no idea what's going through their mind. They don't have time to listen to a 70-minute preamble. They need a very succinct ask and background on what it is that you need. I think the next thing is very important. Always be honest, transparent, reliable, and logical. No one wants to deal with someone who is in 100 places and they can't trust you. So that's something you develop over time, being reliable and logical and transparent about what you're doing. And I do that for my division members, and I do it when I talk to my mentors and my leaders. And be active, not passive. Okay, money. Know your market value. There are published national benchmarks for your salary. If you don't know that, you need to find out. There are national benchmarks for your productivity that are specific for your specialty, and you need to know what those are and know how things are going. So as an example, our division, people always want you to be more productive and do more clinical work, but I actually looked at our productivity for the division, and we were actually at the 80th or 90th percentile, which meant to me that not only should we not be trying to make the people that exist work harder, we need to use that to negotiate to get more faculty so that we actually are more in range with the average productivity of the division. So those are important things for you to have. And then you need to know what your value-added attributes are that will allow you to negotiate above those averages. So if you have some unique skill, you need to be able to market that. Be acutely aware of the goals and constraints of your supervisors and their supervisors, because when I go to my division and say, here's what the goal is, that's maybe partially my goal, but it's also Dr. Steinhorn's goal, and her goal is Dr. Newman's goal. So you have to be aware of these things at a higher level and not just focus in on your simple request. And then never undervalue your work. So be very beware, and I say this particularly to young women who have children, of part-time work, because part-time work is almost never part-time work. And really what I have found in junior faculty, men or women, is that what they really are needing is flexibility in their schedule, not part-time work, because they are working from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. before the hospital. They're working from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. And if they're writing grants and writing papers, they should be paid full-time, not being paid part-time because they're not sitting in the hospital from 8 to 5. And then lastly, care for yourself, and I call this the oxygen mask. So when you're on the plane and they say put the oxygen mask on yourself before you help your other people, this is really how I like to think about it. You cannot do any of these things we just talked about if you do not take care of yourself. So for me, there's a mental, physical, and spiritual realm to taking care of yourself. It's different for everyone. But for me, I have a network of not only medical, but I purposely try to have a very broad non-medical network of friends. I'll show you a couple pictures. I'm Italian, so family is important, and I have a very large family, and that's one of the primary drivers for why we came back to the East Coast when I had children. Hobbies, you want to maintain your own hobbies that you had from when you were in kindergarten. You know, and I find that if I forget to play the piano for a while, something just doesn't seem right, and then I remember, oh yeah, I like to play the piano, and I go sit down and play the piano, and it's really helpful for me. Vacation, take your vacation. I think there's lots of studies that show that people don't take their vacation, and not only is that bad for you personally, but it's bad for your ultimate career because you become burnt out and then you're not effective at doing the things that we just talked about. Physical exercise versus achievement. So between 30 and 40 years of age, my idea of exercise was like, I'm doing that marathon, I'm doing the half marathon, I got to get my grid and I got to do the 5, 6, 8, 10, you know. So just get away, when you get a little older, you kind of say, wow, well, maybe I could just exercise and not go on a grid, you know. So it is good to have these goals and achievements, but I think exercise just for the sake of being outside and getting some movement is equally important to also trying to overachieve in your exercise like you do at work sometimes. And then spiritual, you may or may not believe in a higher power, you may or may not have an organized religion, but the point here is that you have to have something in your life that puts you in perspective with the bigger picture. And honestly, the easiest way I talk about this is just something that makes you feel small. So yes, you need to market yourself and toot your horn and all that, but you need to have something in your life that makes you feel small so that you can put yourself and everything else you're doing in perspective. Because if you don't, you just get completely derailed, and I won't go on a political bend right now. So this is just some examples of my friends. So this is one of my best friends from college. She lives in D.C. We get together at least every couple months and do something at the Kennedy Center. This is my roommate from med school. We get together all the time. And by the way, my friends from college has nothing to do with medicine. This is one of my friends from fellowship. We get together at least 3 times a year and have a great time when we go to meetings. This is my book club. We've been together 10 years, and there's an architect, an engineer, herbalist, you know, all kinds of different things. And it's fun to get all their different perspectives. And these are the ladies I play in a competitive golf league, and we go all over the place and do these crazy tournaments. I have kids, and that's been a joy of my life, and really important for why we moved back here to be integrated with my family. I have a husband who's very supportive, and Archie's mentioned that, you know, you can't achieve any of this stuff if you don't have a supportive significant other at home. We like to hike, we like to ski. This is extended family, so, you know, my kids have 10 cousins, 8 aunts and uncles, 4 grandparents. They're all alive. They all get along well. So we thought, you know, this is the time to come back, and that's really why we came back. And then this is some of my non-medical identities. So I like to surf, believe it or not. I like to play the piano. I like to travel. This is Bill Gaillard and I climbed the Great Wall of China when we were on the trip to China. I love to ski. My son and I just spent a week skiing together. I love to golf. So these are all things that you may not see when you see me in the hallway, but they're really important to me. And if I didn't do these, I could not do what I do, you know, every day in the hospital. So you've got to focus on that identity. So I'm going to end there. This is my family here at the hospital. We have a really great ID division in infection control and emerging infectious disease group. But it's really a microcosm of my bigger life and how I try to strategize for in my own career. So I'm going to turn it over to Archie. Hopefully I can find it. Yes. And slideshow. You see slideshow? There it is. There it is. Okay. Actually,
good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Roberta, and the Watch Group for this kind invitation. I do like to actually be in front of the podium rather than step behind the podium, but for today, we'll just do it this way. So it's a delight to see you all here this morning. And I'm particularly happy to see a few people of the Y chromosome persuasion. My remarks today will mostly be addressed to women because this is the area that I think we still have a lot of work to do to advance women's careers. However, I will say that in order to do that, you need a few good men. A lot of the positions of power in academic medicine and in most other arenas are held by men, and we need them to support and encourage women to achieve what they are trying to do. So I truly appreciate the gentleman in the audience. So I'll start with Wall Street. We're talking CEOs, right? So I thought, what better than to start with a business kind of example. So how many of you know the name of this statue? Her name is the Fearless Girl. That's what they call her, okay? Turns out she's designed by a woman, and if you can see, she's facing the Wall Street Bull. Apparently, they're going to move this statue to where the New York Stock Exchange is. I looked it up yesterday, and that's the plan. Bill de Blasio wants to move it at the end of the year. But the reason I put it up there is often women start very early in life in this kind of situation. And we don't, it's kind of dramatic, but we don't think about it that way. But that actually is what a lot of young girls and women are facing. I have no conflicts with this talk today, and I would like you all to help me be more interactive and participate in the rest of the time we have together. So, name these guys. Who are these gentlemen? Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Facebook. This guy, not as many people know him. He's the CEO of Google, Sundar Pichai. This gentleman, Amazon's Jeff Bezos. And this guy, that is correct, that's Daryl Kirch. So easy, right? Try these. I will tell you that, as Roberta mentioned, this has been my brainchild. I've thought about this, talked about this, although I've actually never given the presentation. This is the first time I'm doing it. Roberta and Dr. Vicki Frazier from WashU have really been carrying the torch. I knew a couple of these women, or at least of them, but a couple I didn't. So this is Mary Barra. How many of you have heard that name? CEO of GM, okay? This lady is Ginny Rometty, CEO of IBM, okay? This is Indra Nooyi, CEO of PepsiCo. And this is Marilyn Hewson, CEO of Lockheed Martin. These are Fortune 500 companies led by women, right? And yet, in a group where we think we want to be supportive of women and we think about this a lot, even some of us who are talking about this don't know what these great women. So the point I'm making is that often women's work is unseen or unrecognized, and we want to change that. So I've got a very ambitious learning objective agenda for the 20 minutes or so that I have, but I'm going to quickly go through some statistics with you to give you a sense of where we are in academic medicine when it comes to the status of women. We'll talk a little bit about some values and behaviors. I think Roberta has really gone over most of those in detail with you. We'll discuss career paths in academic pediatrics, and this is not specific to women at all. A template for enhancing your visibility, again, not specific to women. And then we will go back to some special challenges that women face in their academic careers and how they can overcome them. So we'll start here. These are data from the AAMC looking at 2003, 2004 versus 2013, 14. These are the most recent data we have on the status of women in academic medicine. And I'll just call your attention to a couple of pieces of data. So these are the proportion of full professors. There were 14% in 03-04. They're a whopping 21% now, or were in 2013-14, and the numbers probably haven't changed that much. So there's very little incremental change that's happening in the higher academic ranks in academic medicine. These are snapshot data from 2014, looking at the proportion of women here who were full professors was only 13%. Most of the women who held academic ranks were assistant professors, about half of them. Very different when you look at the men. There's about a third that were full professors, a little over 20% associates, about 40% were assistant professors. So clear, dramatic differences in where men and women are in terms of their academic advancement. If you look at leadership, it looks gloomier, particularly when you're looking at what I call nodal points and sort of the peak of achievement, which is deanship. So the nodal points are department chairs, and I'll show you here in a minute pathways to leadership and why I come to nodal points. Somewhere around 15–16% of department chairs across the country are women, and about the same proportion are deans. So again, huge disparity there. In pediatrics, I was elected last year to the board of directors of Amsterdam. We talked a little bit earlier about how 70% of the pediatricians in the country are women, 70% of the department chairs in pediatrics are men. So there's, again, big discrepancies there. And then lastly, a little bit of why this is the situation. I think most of you probably know some of the reasons why. These are data from what was called the Faculty Forward Survey. The AAMP now calls it Standpoint Survey. These are faculty surveys looking at various aspects of academic work. But this particular section of the survey looks at what do women faculty say they need to succeed. So the first part that was abstracted out was that they're looking for clear expectations about the role and the path of advancement. Roberta talked about knowing the rules. This is what women want to know. And I would say it's not just women. Men want to know the same thing. So it's important that they receive performance feedback, there's clarification of what their roles are. And as Roberta also alluded to, these roles change over time. When you come in, your role might be very different than what it evolves into eventually. Women want to have an equitable and diverse workplace. I don't know anybody who really doesn't want to do that. But they pulled this out as something that is particularly important to women. And what they're asking for is equal opportunity. They're not necessarily saying, well, we want equal outcomes. That will come if you provide the equal opportunity. And then they want opportunities for development and advancement. Mentorship is pulled out, professional development programming, such as this, etc. So I'm going to change gears here and talk a little bit about values and what values might lead you to career success as the CEO of your career. So what are values? Most of us know this, but when we talk about values, a lot of people start thinking about actually the actual values that we hold, integrity, honesty, things like that. But there's the really things you believe are important in everything that you do. And the reason to define what your values are, stop and take a moment, is they help determine what the priorities are. And you want to, of course, measure how you use measures to tell if you are leading a meaningful life, and that is based on your values. And then finally, this is the part that we don't talk much about at all, which is these are the source of happiness or unhappiness for us. If your stated values are here and what you're doing is over here, there's no alignment, that's the source of trouble. That's where you're going to feel burned out, disaffected, wanting to leave, things like that. So this is where I would like you all to do a little exercise with me, and if you would send those out, the package the paper that's going around has a chart on it for the moment, just turn the chart over and play with me. Okay. If everybody's got something to write with, that would be great. If you haven't, we'll make do anyway. Okay. So the first thing I want everybody to do is list 3 top values for you. And this list I actually got off of something called mindtools.com. It's out of a TED Talk, which is actually transcribed. And it lists a lot of different values that people might hold. Some of these may be important to you, some may be not so important to you. Just think of, what do you think are 3 core values for you? Okay? Take a minute, write those down. Or if you don't have a writing implement, just think about what your values are. This is not where I'm going to ask you what they are. There will be a sharing part later. And by the way, I see some of you trying to take pictures of the slides. Please make the slides available to anybody who wants them. Okay? All right, so everybody got their 3 values jotted down? Okay. All right. So now that you know what you profess to be your values, let's clarify what is important to you. All right? So the first thing I want you to do is write down your legacy. And this is always a hard exercise for people because, especially when I do this with students, what is she talking about? My legacy? I just want to get out of medical school, you know. So take a minute. Bear with me. 1 sentence, not an essay. Okay. Next thing, we've already done this with your core values, beliefs, and ideas, so we'll skip this one. And this is the last one. What kind of, and I changed this for a different audience, but for this audience, what kind of pediatrician do I want to be? And if you're not a pediatrician, whatever your discipline is, what kind of researcher do I want to be? What kind of nurse do I want to be? Whatever is your discipline. Take a minute. I usually allow a lot more time to do this exercise, but because we are short today, we're going to keep moving ahead. So the purpose of these exercises is for us to bring that alignment between what we say are our values, what are our actions that are ultimately going to lead us to the goals that we've established that Roberta talked about. So this is something called the 4-domain view. This was developed by a professor at Wharton, Dr. Stu Friedman. He's a business guy, okay? And he's taught this at Wharton. It's part of the work-life integration project at Wharton. He's taught this to people at Toyota and Ford and big multinational companies, et cetera. It's actually a very simple concept, which is to say, what are the domains in all of our lives, okay? There's work and career, which is what we focus on a lot. There's home and family that Roberta talked about. There's the self that Roberta talked about as well. And then there's the 4th domain, which a lot of people don't think about, which is the community or the society. So these are the 4 areas in our lives, right? And at the end of the talk, I'll show you some websites that you can use where you can actually do these exercises online and kind of figure out where your 4 domains fit. So the paper that we handed out actually is to do this exercise, which is looking at these 4 domains, assigning a percentage of importance based on our values that we have for these, Then the focus, not time, but the focus that what I was talking about. How much are we focused on each of these? How satisfied are we with the match? And then how are we actually doing? What's our performance metrics here? And the last two are from 1, which is not at all, to 10, which is fully. Note that the first two columns should add up to 100% and not 250% like I did the first time, okay? So take a minute and just fill this up really quickly. Okay, looks like some of you are done. Others are still working on it. But in the interest of time, let's continue. So what do you see when you try to analyze those responses? Anybody want to volunteer? Otherwise, I know a few names. I can call them out. Please. So the focus is off, all right? So those 4 circles I showed you, actually, they're supposed to form like a Venn diagram. And ideally, if your focus and your values, whatever you identify as the priorities, are aligned, it'll look like the concentric rings on a tree, right? When we do this exercise, I teach this actually at the Executive Leadership and Academic Medicine program at Drexel. When we do this exercise, a lot of the time you've got these all over the place. Also, the size of those circles matters. So unfortunately, a lot of the time, the size of your work circle is far larger than you want it to be. The size of yourself is much smaller. There's no intersection of these things. And there's a whole program, it's called the Total Leadership Program, that Steve Friedman developed that we use to guide people on how to bring those things into alignment. So I encourage you to take a look at the website and kind of work this out for yourself. Why is this important? Because if you're going to be the CEO of your career, it doesn't mean make that work thing as big as you can. What it means is bring these things into alignment, and you will be far more successful at what you're trying to achieve. Okay, so again, in the interest of time, we're going to keep moving ahead. This is from one of my daughter's favorite movies, Alice in Wonderland. Most of this audience will recognize it. And there's Alice, she's lost, and she's asking the Cheshire Cat, what road do I take? And Cheshire Cat says, well, where are you going? And she says, I don't know. He says, well, it doesn't matter. If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there, okay? But what they're getting at is you've got to know where you're going. What are your goals? What do you want to achieve? And then you figure out the path. There's a Yogi Berra quote, which I often get wrong, but it's something like, if you don't know where you're going, you might end up somewhere else. So the same kind of concept here. What this leads me into talking about is traditional pathways to leadership in academic medicine. And I realize that for you, depending on where you are in your career, you might already be a leader, so it may not matter. You might be very early in your career and thinking, I don't know, I don't think that's for me. What I will say is it's good to know what these tests are. So again, there are these nodal points. The department chair seems to be a key position to get to many of these other senior leadership positions, as well as to the deanships at Met. But you see that there are sort of way stations along the way that you could have leadership positions that prepare you to get to some of these higher positions. And again, this is a chart I created, and a lot of people have told me, well, there could be an arrow going from here to there, and there are other things that are missing. Not important. This is just to start a conversation. Let's talk, though, about career paths in academic pediatrics, which is really what most of you are perhaps interested in. So the first thing is, we've talked about this three-legged stool for a long time, and it's sort of morphed into a four-legged stool now. Research used to be sort of the underpinning, the cornerstone. It is now sort of been advanced into talking about not just research, but scholarly activity as a whole. If you're not familiar with it, Boyer's definition of scholarship has been expanded beyond the scholarship of discovery, which is what research is. It still remains in academic medicine and academic pediatrics, a very important thing. But we are now talking about the scholarship of education, the scholarship of integration, scholarship of application, etc. And promotion committees need to be paying attention to those things if we are going to advance all of the work that our good folks are doing. Research, as you see here, defined in several different ways. The education piece, this is where women often get tapped, and this is where their interests are, this is where their priorities are. They want to educate the next generation of physicians. It's fine, but you want to make sure that that is what your institution values. At my institution, we're a community-based medical school. This is the primary reason that people get promoted. I'm seeing across the country now where people have one area of focus or two areas of focus rather than all of the 3 or 4 areas. And the service part, you know, often clinical is a very big piece of it for the clinicians in the room, but there are other types of service. At my institution, there are 5 types of service that are that. So you have to know what those are in order to meet those criteria. And then I'll just say a little bit about how you get to your goal. Important to remember that you've got to have that vision, you've got to have that goal to get there, and it has to be something specific. It's not like, well, I'm going to be successful when I grow up. That's not going to work. The key here is to recognize that getting to that goal, which may be a big piece, is achieved in small incremental steps. So break it down, because if your goal is to be Dean of the Medical School at George Washington University, that's a big goal to have. It's going to take many smaller achievements to get there. You want to be on the path that you choose. That's the CEO part. Act on what's doable, what's under your control. If you are a worker bee, you're thinking, yeah, all that stuff is great, but I got to do, you know, I got my RVUs to fulfill, and I got to get my grants done and whatever. Act on what you can act on. You want to build up momentum. You want to work with people around you. We're going to talk about teams. You know, a lot of the time, and this is true for both men and women, but particularly women tend to do this, we think like we have to do it all. And the answer is you don't. You actually can bring in the team, bring in the village to help you. Acting with urgency when the time is appropriate to do that. Treading water, as Roberta talked about, when the time is appropriate to do that. And giving other people opportunities to help. The last piece of this that I want to talk about is enhancing your visibility. Again, this is something that women do, unfortunately, very poorly sometimes. So creating your personal brand, some people call it having a brand mantra. Mine is to inspire and empower. So think about it. What is yours? Yours may be something completely different. It's something that rolls off your tongue. You can say it in 1 second without thinking about it. Roberta talked about putting yourself and your accomplishments out there. There's a very nice paper, if any of you want it, I can provide it. It's called The Art of Graceful Self-Promotion, written by Paige Morahan many, many years ago. I still use it a lot. Keeping stuff. Everybody's told you, right? Keep everything. Well, this one is a particularly good one because sometimes it's just something to lift your spirits. I have a desk drawer where I keep these thank you notes, things that people have said that are nice. A lot of us get emails. Hang on to those things because they're not just to make you feel good. When you want to look at or reassess, where am I going? What am I good at? What do I need to do? Those things will be helpful to you. The CV we don't have time to talk about, but this is critical. And I get questions sometimes saying, how often do I need to update my CV? It depends on how active you are. There was a time when I was updating my CV every week. That sounds crazy, but I was just doing so much stuff. I don't have to do that as much anymore. Once a month is about what I do. Some people don't need to do it maybe 6 months or a year. Depends how active you are. Positive relationships, we talked about that. Networking is critical. And we were talking last night at dinner that there are actually data to show that people who network achieve better career success than those who are in their little field trying to do things by themselves. These two, looking for opportunities, stepping up and volunteering, Roberta gave you some nice examples of that. I would say be strategic. Whatever you're being asked to do, is this something that is going to advance you in the direction you want to go? Sometimes that's not clear right off the bat, but think about it, talk to your mentors, talk to your advisors, and then decide. I have some very sharp faculty members. When I ask them to do something, they'll say, can you give me a little time to think about it? Yes. The message I've been trying to say is don't say yes right away, okay? Think about it, see how it fits in with your goals and plans, and then learning how to say a strategic yes and a graceful no. The strategic yes is pretty easy. That's what I just talked about. The graceful no. Who knows how to say a graceful no? Anybody want to volunteer? Yeah, go for it. Okay, so offer something else because you can't or don't want to do it. So a graceful no has several components. Acknowledging that they asked you. Okay, thank you for thinking about me. Okay. Give a reason for why you're refusing, whether it's a real reason or not. Say, you know, at this time I don't think I can devote the time and energy that is needed, or whatever it is. Give the reason for no, and recommend somebody else who might be the good person. That's a graceful no. Okay. Follow through on your commitments, kind of obvious. And the last one, very important. And again, you know, I teach this around the country, and I found myself doing it last night. Somebody complimented me on the work I've been doing, and I said, well, I've been really lucky. And I said, no. Yes, luck does play an element. I would say that we would be stupid to ignore luck. But don't attribute everything that you do, or when somebody pays you a compliment. I got a compliment this morning. I did what my mentors have taught me to do. So that's all that you do. And this is the very last piece of it, which is special challenges for women. So establishing credibility. Men are expected by society to be independent, to be assertive. When women try to do exactly the same thing, it doesn't go over very well sometimes. So be aware of that. We didn't make the rules. We just have to live by those. Unconscious bias is real and alive. And all of us have it. Anyone who thinks that they don't have unconscious bias is simply uninformed. Okay? So that's something that women are fighting. Not a lot of role models, like I talked about early on. Lacking mentors, networks, sponsors. We don't have time to talk about sponsorship, but this is something important for women to have, people who will promote them publicly. And then lastly, work-life balance. This is not unique to women. I'm hearing more and more of my male faculty, my male residents talking about this, and I'm very glad to see that because that is critical in order to achieve success. These are the references I was talking about, and here are some of these websites. Part of Stu's website you have to pay for, but part of it is free, so you can create those course circles and see where you're at and all that stuff. And then Roberta shared a lot of pictures with you. This is the one I like to share. This is my husband and daughter. and they are very critical to my success. I always like to acknowledge them. And with that, sorry I've run out of time, haven't left time for questions, but thank you again very, very much.